So as you like, we now have a timeline of our Irish history here in Lewiston and Auburn. And perhaps at the end of the evening, you can peruse through and see what it looks like. And now we'll shift gears and go into the neighborhood right around this building, up and down Lisbon Street and a little bit on Main Street. We'll look at some of the buildings that housed Irish businesses and that were built by Irish immigrants and their children. Now, just down the street is on the other side of the street, at the corner of Ash and Lisbon, is the first McGillicuddy block. And it was built by John and Ellen McGillicuddy. John was the brother of Patrick McGillicuddy, who we talked a little bit about on Tuesday night. And the McGillicuddys came from the village of Sneem in County Kerry. And it's a very distinctive name, and that is the area. If you hear the name McGillicuddy, that's where they came from. And the McGillicuddys are associated with it's a variant of a Sullivan family name. But in the first McGillicuddy building, there were at least two very Irish operations going on. Daniel McGillicuddy, the son of John and Ellen, had his law offices on I would guess the second floor, and of course he became the first mayor, first Irish mayor of Lewiston, and was also a successful attorney and went on to be elected to 3 terms as a U.S. congressman from this district. He's also significant in that it was during his second term as mayor that our current City Hall was built. He headed the committee, And wouldn't you know, Irishmen were contracted to do a bit of the work. My mind's blanking here. See, the stonework was done by the Lewiston Monumental Works across over by the railroad tracks, Main Central Railroad. And Clifford and Bierce were contractors on that job as well. Another local Irish firm. On the first floor, for many years, was the fur and men's furnishings shop of Timothy Murphy, T.J. Murphy. And I knew of this place long ago. My grandmother had a fur coat from the Murphys. And me, again, I got started in the 4th grade with this stuff when we were here in Auburn for some brief period. Happened to look at her jacket in the hallway as I was hanging up my coat and saw there was a Murphy, and so I thought, I wonder if this is our family. So I went to ask her and said, no, different Murphys. So years later, I come to learn a little bit about the Murphys. We had his shop there. Historically, it's interesting. He started out with making buffalo robes, and so when you hear about the near extermination of the buffalo in the American plains, well, T.J. Murphy here in Lewiston was a participant in that. And what they would use them for, of course, was in the old days on a sleigh. You often didn't have a covering and didn't have any heating, so you had this nice heavy buffalo robe to cover you and keep you warm as you traveled. So that was how he got his start on Lisbon Street, and eventually expanded into men's furnishings as well. John and Ellen McGillicuddy also built the second McGillicuddy block, which is across the street and down. Let me tell it this way. And this building is interesting. Let's see, this was built in 1901. First McGillicuddy was 1895. But what I found really interesting on the second McGillicuddy block is the top floor, the 4th floor. And there are 2 national symbols incorporated into that 4th floor. You can make out the iron crosses. As you look at the windows, you can see that they've got the wings on top, bottom, and each side. So they're iron crosses, and then of course 2 more next to the nameplate. Well, that iron cross was, of course, the symbol for Germany. And you can't really make it out as well in the drawing here because brown and black are pretty close. But the window framing on those top floor windows makes a Union Jack, which is the British symbol, of course. And at the turn of the century, who were the 2 great powers in Europe vying with each other, who a few years later ended up in open conflict in the First World War, but England and Germany don't see any signs of France there. But, so it's just an interesting detail of architecture that those were up there. That unless you're looking up, which most of us don't tend to because we're in a car, and we don't really get to see the building. This is why I encourage folks to get out and walk their town, because take a look at the buildings and look around. Go slowly, notice things, and then if there's something you don't understand, ask somebody about it. It will enrich your life. For some years, Bliss Business College was in the McGillicuddy block. So the McGillicuddys had 2 buildings. There was another family that had 2 buildings, 2 large buildings, and those were the Callahan brothers. Timothy F. and Eugene Callahan had a bag and trunk business. So these were the guys making the carpet bags for the people that were headed south after the war. They made carpet bags, and they made trunks and repaired trunks and things, and they also got into the men's furnishing business. This is their first building. It's on this side of the street, down at the corner with Chestnut Street. And you notice on this building, you can see the pillars, adding a classical element. It's all brick, but they incorporated some pillars in there. And when you see the Italianate style brackets across the roof line as well. And that was built in 1892. Remarkable feature, there isn't much in the way of granite on this building. Okay, and you'll see what I mean when we look at their next building. There isn't much in the way of granite, just the sills under the windows.
What number is that on the roof? What number is it?
I don't know off the top of my head. But it's on the corner with Chestnut Street on this side of the street. And this is its brother right next to it. This is the second Callahan. And the second Callahan was built in 1910. And you can see that there's a fair bit more granite in there. It's not just the sills, but the keystones over the windows, a large belt, of course, across the middle of the building, the bases and the tops of the pillars on the third and fourth stories. And overall, it's a more ornate business and an ornate building. And you can tell that these guys at their store had to have been prosperous. This building's decked out just a bit more than their first building. And Timothy went into, I believe, insurance and real estate towards the end of his career. And I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe that John Callahan, who was responsible for this room, I believe was Timothy's son. Was likely Timothy's son. Don't know that for a fact, but I know I've seen the name associated with these two guys. So these two are together. This one's on the right, and the brick building is on the left as you look at them from the street. Timothy was also involved a little bit in local politics. As a councilman, ran for various offices at different times. This is the Ellard block. George Ellard was this is here on Lisbon Street, just a few doors down, on this block actually, down the street here. And as you look up at the building, the nameplate, of course, has Ellard, which doesn't sound necessarily Irish, but he did come from Ireland. And one of the signs that he put in there for us were the two discs off on either side of the nameplate, which have shamrocks on them. So he was part of his Irish origins. And it's a neat building. It's seen some restoration work recently. The windows, the first floor doesn't look the same. If you're walking by and you're curious, you can step inside that left doorway, and there's a sign inside that shows some of the businesses that were once occupied the building that somebody uncovered in that restoration work. That's pretty interesting. But George ran a boot and shoe business, and he came here in the 1860s. He departed, I believe it was 1912, 1913, thereabouts. He had a boot and shoe business in this building. He was a little bit different too. He was a bachelor. I found another George Ellard in New York early on. I don't know if it's the same guy or not. So it's possible that he may have been married earlier on, but he, as far as I know, he was not married here. And the city directories indicate that he lived in as a bachelor in a couple of the different hotels in here, the DeWitt over on the Park, and there was another one over on the other side of Main Street that he stayed at, where he lived. And down at the head of Lisbon Street is the Union Block, and mentioned this on Tuesday. But in the Union Block was the printing business of George A. Callahan.